welcome 5th grade. We're videoing in the house today. I just have everything set up on the kitchen table. Yesterday, you would have read about the start of Russian history and the Russian czars. That's what they call their leader, is czars. Sometimes you see it spelled T-S-A-R instead of C-Z-A-R. You read about Ivan the Terrible, about Napoleon's defeat when he went into Russia because of the winter. Of course, with Ivan the Terrible, page 268, I love the pictures down there. Ivan the Terrible truly looks terrible. You start reading the Russian history outline, hopefully. Under Ivan the First, Russia was going into feudalism as the rest of Europe was coming out of feudalism. Then you have other czars, other leaders that want to westernize Europe. On 270, you read some about Marxism and the beginning of communism. Today, you're going to start talking about the Bolsheviks. 5th grade doesn't go as much detail about the Bolshevik Revolution and about the last Romanov dynasty as the 7th grade book does. But I personally find it very, very interesting. So I'm going to give you some extra information in this video. And then I've got a link that I want you to click on and read from the History Channel that will tell you a little bit more about the Romanovs. The Romanovs were the last dynasty in Russia. The dad would have been Tsar Nicholas II. He would have had, I'm pretty sure it's 4 daughters and a son. The most famous of the daughter is Anastasia. Prologue. Behind the palace gates once lived a girl named Anastasia. Her father was Tsar Nicholas II, who ruled over the vast Russian Empire. Even though Anastasia and her sisters and brother lived in a palace with hundreds of servants, they enjoyed playing games and doing things the other families would have done. And this is called Anastasia's album, which it's like Anastasia's writing it, telling about the fun things that she would have done with her family. One of the Romanov family was really disliked. Because of the fact that Tsar Nicholas and his family were living in wealth and everybody else was starving. Here's a picture of an Easter egg that he would have given every year to his wife. It was called a Fabergé egg, named after the person that made it. It was made of gold, rubies, diamonds, and pearls. So that tells you how wealthy they were and everybody else is starving. Here is the picture of the palace. I don't think I've talked about as much with you, but it was very, very important for kings or czars, rulers during this time to have sons, because they wanted to have a son to be able to rule after them. So Tsar Nicholas didn't have a son until when Anastasia was 3, her brother was born, and she was too young to understand what hemophilia was. Backtracking a page. I keep forgetting I need to read this page back here first. When baby Alexia began to crawl, dark bruises appeared on his legs and arms. His mother noticed them and became frightened. Soon she learned the terrible truth. Her son was a hemophiliac. His blood did not clot properly, and any bump or fall could cause serious internal bleeding. 2 sailors from the royal yacht were assigned to watch and protect him at all times. And it had to be kept a secret because nobody wanted everybody else in the country to know that the next leader of Russia had a horrible disease. Get a good close look at that guy. He's kind of a creepy looking dude. That's Rasputin. All right. Alexandra, sorry, I'm having trouble with names today. She's the wife of Tsar Nicholas. Was often unwell after Alexei was born. She worried constantly about her son's health and suffered greatly when he had one of his attacks of severe bleeding. The strain took its toll on her own health, and sometimes she would stay in her bed for days at a time. The only person who could bring her comfort was Rasputin, a bearded monk. When Rasputin prayed or laid his hands on Alexei, his bleeding would miraculously stop. To Alexandra, Rasputin was a gift from God. but many important people thought he was a fraud. They also resented the fact that a poor peasant had become a person of such importance to the imperial family. And Rasputin is kind of an interesting guy who had a lot of control and closeness. March 17th, an icy wind howled across the Alexandra Palace on the night of March 13th, 1917. Anastasia looked out her window at a huge gun that soldiers guarding the palace had set up in the courtyard. Dad was gone. Skipping ahead a little bit, when he came back, it would be a week before her father returned. And when he did, he was no longer the Tsar. Ruling people of his government had formed their own government. To prevent further rioting and bloodshed, they had asked Nicholas to give up his throne. And they did. And he did. And things kind of stayed the same for a while. Until June 18, 1918. Where they are now being kept under house arrest. The website tells you more about that. But they were being kept under house arrest during the Russian Revolution in November of 1917. The Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, seized power in Russia. They were sent to live under house arrest in Siberia. Then they were moved to a house I'm not going to try to pronounce. After the revolution, civil war broke out between the Bolshevik Red Army and the anti-Bolshevik White Russian forces. Local authorities were ordered to prevent a rescue of the Romanovs, and the family was sentenced to death. And what makes Anastasia so interesting is it wasn't until 1991 that we figured out for sure whether or not Anastasia had escaped, because there was some debate as to whether or not Anastasia had been able to escape when the rest of the royal family was executed. Finally, in 1991, they found DNA evidence that she hadn't. So your homework is to read page 271 to 274, which talks about the Bolshevik Revolution, Lenin, Stalin, and some other Russian leaders. To read the website that I am going to link for you to the discussion part of the LMS website. And then you will have an open book quiz to do as well over pages 267 to 264. Yesterday's reading and today's reading. See you tomorrow.